At the precise instant, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez asserted to President Trump during a nationwide broadcast that he personified every systemic failure of the capitalist framework, she committed the monumental blunder typical of many socialist advocates. She neglected the reality that she was confronting a self-reliant tycoon, possessing a profound, practical grasp of macroeconomic principles. While she found herself unable to articulate exactly how the $93 trillion required for the Green New Deal would be generated, Fox News had already orchestrated what they termed the definitive American confrontation capitalism against socialism, framing it as the quintessential political spectacle of the current era, and perhaps even the century. The concept had emerged from a spontaneous suggestion during a Fox and Friends segment, pondering the impact of a direct economic debate between Trump and AOC. The public's enthusiasm was so immense that the network committed to the project within 48 hours, contacting both political camps, securing a primetime slot, and marketing it as the essential dialogue that the nation desperately required. To the amazement of the general public, both parties consented to the engagement, as Ocasio-Cortez's advisors convinced her that this represented a premier opportunity to enlighten the Fox News viewership regarding the merits of democratic socialism. Her team believed she could demonstrate to the American people that progressive fiscal policies were logically sound, thereby proving she was a serious legislator rather than merely a digital media phenomenon. They spent several weeks meticulously training her, consulting with various economists to deepen her understanding of the Nordic socio-economic model and rehearsing her responses to the anticipated rhetorical attacks from the opposition. They prepared detailed talking points centered on themes of wealth disparity, environmental urgency, and corporate malfeasance, while simultaneously coordinating with sympathetic media outlets to ensure the post-debate narrative remained favorable. Her supporters were entirely convinced that her natural charisma, refined communication abilities, and fervent advocacy would successfully persuade an audience that had never previously encountered a coherent presentation of the socialist perspective. However, they had fundamentally misjudged the nature of their own candidate, as well as the capabilities of her adversary. Trump's advisors had accepted the challenge immediately for a singular, clear reason. The president had been anticipating this specific confrontation for several years. He had spent considerable time observing Ocasio-Cortez as she disseminated what he considered economic fallacies across social media, criticizing the capitalist system while simultaneously enjoying a high-status lifestyle. He noted her proposals for multi-trillion-dollar initiatives that lacked any viable funding mechanisms and her attempts to position herself as a champion of the working class, despite her upbringing in an affluent suburban environment. He had watched with keen interest as she successfully lobbied to prevent Amazon from establishing a presence in New York, a move that resulted in the loss of 25,000 potential jobs, yet which she characterized as a political triumph. He had observed her promotion of the Green New Deal without the ability to provide even the most basic financial projections or cost-benefit analyses. He witnessed her ascension as the symbolic leader of progressive economics. Despite what he viewed as a complete lack of fundamental economic literacy, and he was now determined to dismantle her arguments on national television before a massive audience of 20 million people. Ocasio-Cortez entered the arena believing she could educate the conservative viewership on the nuances of democratic socialism, armed with rehearsed speeches regarding Scandinavian policies and the evils of corporate greed. Paradoxically, given the nature of her socialist platform, she arrived wearing a highly expensive designer ensemble, prepared to generate viral content of herself theoretically defeating the president. She had carefully polished her narrative of being a simple girl from the Bronx, hoping to secure a rhetorical victory that would resonate across digital platforms. Trump, conversely, accepted the debate because he never retreats from a confrontation, and because he had meticulously prepared for this moment. He brought tools that his opponent had not anticipated: a physical calculator, copies of her personal tax filings, photographic evidence of her affluent lifestyle, and the comprehensive cost assessments of the Green New Deal that her staff had allegedly tried to conceal. Having conducted exhaustive research and gathered his receipts, he was prepared to deliver a rigorous lesson in economics that Ocasio-Cortez had seemingly overlooked during her studies at Boston University. What transpired over the following 90 minutes would effectively challenge the credibility of progressive politics, transform the tax the rich slogan into a subject of ridicule, and marginalize a digital superstar. For those interested in seeing a confrontation between a man who had constructed a global business empire and a former bartender who believed her service experience qualified her for economic leadership, this was the ultimate showdown. The climax occurred around the 38th minute, when Trump highlighted her complaints regarding her six-figure salary, causing her expression to reveal her internal distress. The Fox News studio in Manhattan was filled to its absolute limit, with security personnel forced to deny entry to hundreds of hopeful spectators. The audience of 500 was divided between Trump loyalists in patriotic attire and Ocasio-Cortez supporters donning socialist-themed apparel, with a small group of undecided voters positioned in the center to witness the historical event. The set was meticulously crafted for dramatic effect, featuring two angled podiums and large digital displays for evidence, with Sean Hannity serving as the moderator between them. Behind the scenes, the disparity between the two camps was stark. Ocasio-Cortez's preparation room was a hive of frantic activity, involving 8 staff members managing social media, a communications director seeking viral opportunities, and 2 economists attempting to explain basic fiscal concepts to her. A stylist made final adjustments to her appearance, while a crisis management team stood ready to deploy narratives regarding racial identity if the debate shifted unfavorably. The Congresswoman herself was reviewing data on Scandinavian healthcare and wealth inequality, confident that her digital following would ensure her success. In contrast, Trump's green room was quiet and focused. He sat alone with his materials and a soda, eschewing a large staff or crisis team in favor of his own experience and preparation. He spent his final moments refining his timing for specific retorts, relishing the opportunity to challenge the Democratic Party's most prominent social media figure. Having spent half a century navigating the complexities of New York real estate and winning the presidency against all odds, he felt ready to provide a practical education to his opponent. When the production assistant announced the 2-minute warning, Trump adjusted his tie and walked toward the stage with the composure of a veteran performer. Ocasio-Cortez was the first to emerge, greeted by enthusiastic cheers from her supporters. She wore a high-end designer suit that Trump would later point out cost more than the average citizen's monthly housing payment. She acknowledged the cameras with the precision of a social media professional, offering her signature smile before taking her place at the podium with the confidence of someone who had rarely faced a truly formidable adversary. Trump followed shortly after, receiving a thunderous ovation that visibly impacted the camera equipment and lasted for nearly a minute. He acknowledged the crowd with his characteristic gestures before settling into his position with the ease of a man accustomed to the largest global stages. As Sean Hannity introduced the format, emphasizing substantial policy discussion and mutual respect, it became clear that the professional decorum would be short-lived. When Hannity asked a foundational question regarding economic systems, Ocasio-Cortez immediately interrupted to pivot toward her prepared critique of the president. Using the earnest and slightly breathless tone that characterized her social media presence, she accused Trump of representing the systemic failures of capitalism, citing greed, exploitation, and wealth hoarding. She argued that he had inherited his wealth and was merely defending a system that had failed millions of citizens. She then advocated for a shift toward democratic socialism, citing the Nordic model as a template for free education, universal health care, and a system where the wealthy pay a fair share. Trump responded with a wide grin, sensing a perfect opening. He began by questioning her preference for her name, referencing her childhood in Westchester, which immediately elicited laughter from the audience and put her on the defensive. He then contrasted her theoretical knowledge with his practical experience, noting that he had actually built physical structures and established businesses that employed thousands of people. He highlighted the irony of her expensive education, suggesting that for $250,000, she should have acquired a better understanding of economic fundamentals. He then displayed a video clip of her incorrectly explaining low unemployment rates as being caused by people working multiple jobs. Trump meticulously explained to the audience that unemployment measures those without work, and that holding two jobs does not count a person twice in the statistics, causing a ripple of laughter and visible discomfort among her supporters. The president then moved to what he called her greatest economic achievement, the Amazon HQ2 controversy. He presented data showing that her opposition had cost New York 25,000 high-paying jobs and $27 billion in potential revenue over a decade. When she attempted to argue that the tax incentives could have been spent elsewhere, Trump corrected her by explaining that a tax break is not a cash payment, but an agreement to collect less revenue from a company that does not yet exist in that location. He emphasized that without Amazon, the city received $0 in taxes rather than the billions projected. He concluded this segment by suggesting that given her apparent lack of understanding regarding unemployment, tax incentives, and business operations, she might be better suited for her previous career in hospitality. As Ocasio-Cortez tried to regain her footing by accusing him of exploiting workers, Trump pivoted to the topic of her personal wealth and lifestyle. He displayed a photo of her at the 2021 Met Gala wearing a gown emblazoned with "Tax the Rich," while attending an event where tickets cost $35,000, more than half the annual income of many American households. He further highlighted her luxury apartment in Washington, D.C., which cost $2,700 a month, and her $500 designer shoes worn to a photo op about inequality. He then played a clip of her complaining that her $174,000 congressional salary was insufficient to live on, contrasting this with the national median income of $70,000. He labeled her a champagne socialist and a limousine liberal, arguing that she lived in luxury while demanding sacrifices from the working class. The debate then shifted to the Green New Deal. Trump produced a calculator and detailed the $93 trillion estimated cost, which he noted amounted to $600,000 per American household. He highlighted the frequently asked questions document her office had initially published and then deleted, which contained controversial points about providing economic security for those unwilling to work and the environmental impact of livestock. He mocked the suggestion of replacing air travel with high-speed rail, asking how people would reach Hawaii without airplanes. When he challenged her to explain how to fund such a massive expenditure, she could not provide a specific mathematical answer, leading Trump to assert that the entire proposal was a fantasy that would destroy the economy. He also pointed out that the Prime Minister of Denmark had explicitly stated his country was a market economy, not socialist, further undermining her arguments. In the final stages of the debate, Trump challenged her narrative of being from the Bronx. He presented property records showing she had actually grown up in Yorktown Heights, an affluent suburb in Westchester County with high median home values and excellent schools. He argued that her girl from the streets persona was a manufactured brand, noting that her father was an architect and she had every advantage of a privileged upbringing. He accused her of appropriating the struggle of the working class for political gain while living in luxury. He then addressed her public comments regarding her grandmother in Puerto Rico, noting that she had used her grandmother's damaged home to make political points, but had subsequently rejected over $100,000 in private aid raised by conservatives. He called this behavior inhuman and shameful, arguing that she prioritized her political narrative over the well-being of her own family. When Ocasio-Cortez attempted to label the president a fascist, he responded by listing the numerous things she had labeled as such, including border security and tax cuts, arguing that her own proposals for government control of industry were far closer to the definition of fascism. He also addressed her claims of being a victim during the events of January 6th, displaying a map that showed she was in a separate office building and not in the Capitol building where the breach occurred. He concluded his closing statement by comparing their records on a split screen: his record of job creation and economic growth against her record of chasing away Amazon and proposing unfunded mandates. The aftermath of the debate was catastrophic for Ocasio-Cortez. The video of the encounter amassed over 200 million views within 72 hours, becoming a global viral phenomenon. Her approval ratings plummeted, and moderate Democrats began to distance themselves from her brand. Within a month, she announced she would not seek re-election, a move widely viewed as a direct result of her performance in the debate. The event became a case study in business schools and economics departments as a lesson in the importance of practical knowledge over social media popularity. Trump, meanwhile, celebrated the victory with a massive rally in the South Bronx, where the local community cheered for his defense of capitalism. Ultimately, the debate was seen as a definitive rejection of socialist ideology in favor of the capitalist principles that had historically built the nation.